Situation ethics. Introduction. Joseph Fletcher is identified as the father of situation ethics as well as the pioneer of biomedical ethics. His book Situation Ethics is used as a model for the situation ethics platform, and nearly all later studies and research refer to Fletcher's model. He died in 1991, at the age of 86. He was born a Protestant and became a priest in the Episcopal Seminary in the 1960s. He was an advocate of Planned Parenthood and member of the Euthanasia Educational Council. Definition. Situation ethics is based on one principle: ethics, or doing good, is a matter of always acting in agape, love. Agape is defined as benevolence or goodwill, or as giving love constantly and unconditionally, regardless of the actions of the loved one. Legalism is the insistence that predetermined laws are to be put into action when they are relevant to the situation at hand. Antinomianism says no guidelines or principles, not even love, can tell us whether an action is right or wrong. Four presuppositions. Fletcher's situationism is based on four main presuppositions. Pragmatism: whether we like it or not, what is good must be judged on the basis of what works. Relativism: situation ethics is also based on the principle of relativism. This does not mean that everything is relative. It still claims the principle of love. However, the way in which love is carried out may be different from one situation to another. Positivism: faith claims cannot be proven to be true rationalistically. They can only be posited and affirmed by the person who chooses to believe their accuracy. Thus, situationism does not seek to prove that an ethical conclusion is true. It only seeks to provide justification, support, for the ethical decision. Personalism: ethics cannot be separated from people. To have an ethical system that is based upon a code or rule without regard for the people is pointless. Situationism, with love as its primary standard, focuses on love as it relates to people. Situation ethics is based on 6 fundamentals. Only one thing is intrinsically good, namely, love, nothing else. The ultimate norm of Christian decisions is love, nothing else. Love and justice are the same, for justice is love distributed. Love wills the neighbor's good whether we like him or not. Only the end justifies the means, nothing else. Decisions ought to be made situationally, not prescriptively. Applications of situation ethics. These are some of the examples often used in discussions about situation ethics. As the Russian armies drove westward to meet the American and British armies, a Soviet patrol picked up a Mrs. Bergmeier scavenging food for her 3 children. Unable to get word to the children, she was taken to a prison camp in the Ukraine. Her husband had been captured in the Bulge and taken to a POW camp. When he was returned to Berlin, he spent weeks rounding up his children. Their mother's whereabouts remained a mystery. Meanwhile, Mrs. Bergmeier learned through a sympathetic commandant that her husband and family were trying to keep together and find her. But the rules allowed them to release her for only 2 reasons. Illness needing medical facilities beyond the camps, in which case she would be sent to a Soviet hospital, and pregnancy, in which case she would be sent back to Germany. She turned things over in her mind and finally asked a German camp guard to impregnate her, which he did. She was subsequently sent back to Berlin and to her family. They welcomed her with open arms, even when she told them how she had managed it. When the child was born, they loved him more than the rest, on the view that the child had done more for them than anybody had. In the 18th century along the Boone Trail, the following two scenarios took place. A Scottish woman saw that her suckling baby, ill, and crying, was betraying her and her other 3 children, and the whole company to the Indians. But she clung to her child, and they were caught and killed. A Negro woman, seeing how her crying baby endangered another trail party, killed it with her own hands, to keep silence and reach the fort. Which woman made the right decision? A Romanian Jewish woman doctor aborted the pregnancies of 3,000 Jewish women brought to the concentration camp. If they were found to be pregnant, they would be incinerated. Even if we believe that the human embryos are human lives, by killing 3,000 the doctor saved 3,000 and prevented the murder of 6,000 in total. Is this not good? At first glance, these examples seem to validate situation ethics as a theory, since each seems to demand, literally, a situation ethic, a principle of action, ethic, driven by the judgment of the person caught up in the situation. However, it was always recognized in natural law ethics that it is one thing to have principles of action, another to apply them. In difficult or dilemma situations, like the ones above, a person has to fall back on very basic principles, for example do good, avoid evil, and apply them as best the person could. Has Fletcher really said anything new? And is the concentration on dilemma or near-dilemma situations really that instructive for the student of ethics? Summary: situation ethics. It is an attempt to link Christianity with new morality for man come of age, Robinson. It focuses on Jesus' parable of the Good Samaritan and opposition to Pharisaic legalism. It rejects absolute rules as it solves moral dilemmas situationally and circumstantially. It focuses on positivism and personalism. It is a form of Christian ethic. Principled relativism is how Fletcher describes it. William Barclay's criticisms. Barclay said the examples Fletcher used to illustrate situation ethics are extreme cases. He asked how often people had to make life and death decisions on which situation ethics seemed to be based. He said, "It is much easier to agree that extraordinary situations need extraordinary measures than to think that there are no laws for ordinary life." Ethics in a Permissive Society, 1971. He said that the suggestion that laws could be abandoned if needed was too optimistic. Humans needs laws for protection etc., and how would people know exactly when it was the most loving thing to abandon them? A circumstance to one, may not be to another. He argued that it is hard for individuals to make their own moral decisions in every situation. We can be swayed by emotion or fear and persuade ourselves that we are doing the most loving thing when really we are doing the thing that suits ourselves the most. It is individualistic because humans see things from their own perspective. There is a danger that the ideals of unconditional love may be polluted by a selfish human tendency and people using it as an excuse for not obeying the rules. How many parents can show equal love to strangers as to their own children? This argument made Robinson withdraw his support for situation ethics. Pope Pius. Situation ethics is subjective because decisions are made from within the situation as it is perceived to be. Situation ethics could prove unworkable because it isn't easy to determine all the consequences of an action. Situation ethics seems to be prepared to accept any action at all if it fits the required criteria. What is believed to be a loving end by some could justify actions that many people would regard as wrong.
Strengths of situation ethics. The greatest commandment. It fits in with philosophy and practical ethics because of Jesus in the New Testament. Jesus broke the religious rules and dealt with everyone as individuals and according to circumstances. Bases its decisions upon Christ's statement that the whole of the law was summoned by the command that we ought to love our neighbor. In the greatest commandment, One of the Pharisees tested him as to what was the greatest commandment. He replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and mind. This is the greatest. The second greatest is love your neighbor as yourself." It is flexible, giving people personal freedom to decide what is the most loving action. It is also flexible in the sense that it allows people to take responsibility for their own moral decision-making, so it doesn't patronize them and insist they follow the rules unquestioningly. God did not make us like robots. He gave us free will to make moral choices, and we must exercise that will, not hide behind the rules. Doesn't reject laws, but sees them as useful tools which are not absolutely binding. As opposed to a legalistic, who follows the absolutes, and believes they must tell the truth. Could one day be faced with a murderer who wanted to find out where their wife was, they would be in an impossible position and the most likely go against their approach. An advantage of a situationist is that they can lay aside the rule of not lying for the better outcome of saving a person's life. Agape is central to morality. Is the basis of Fletcher's theory, and there can only be a Christian basis of morality if agape love is seen as central to morality. If we follow how love guides us, how can it be wrong? Weaknesses of situation ethics. What is most loving? The biggest issue is that there will always be a dispute as to what is the most loving action and what this actually means in practice. Everyone is subjective and have their own interpretations of different things and could see one thing as loving and another not. That someone else may object. If two people using this system of ethics came to opposite conclusions as to what they should do, there is no way the dilemma could be solved because it rejects the absolute rules that could guide their actions. To depend a situation on the principle of agape love would be inadequate. His view doesn't reflect New Testament on morality. The New Testament appears to have clear moral views on theft and adultery. Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not commit adultery. The commandments these suggests absolutes which could infer a legalistic point of view that Fletcher rejects. Even though Jesus broke two rules, the two commandments also suggest they were rule. Examples Fletcher uses are too extreme. They account for very few real instances in life. For example, he uses the anecdote of the sacrificial adultery where a poor woman debates on whether to commit adultery with a god in order to be reunited with her family, his idea being that it would bring the most love about. However, it would be immoral and go against thou shalt not commit adultery. This is also very unlikely that a god would do this and go against their morals, not based on an actual situation. Very improbable it happened. William Barclay argued that if law is the distillation of experience that society has found to be beneficial, then to discard law is to discard experience and the valuable wisdom and insight it may bring. When looking back, it is clear that laws have had great impact on the world. It is clear they have stopped people from committing murder. If they weren't, the world would be chaotic. This links to the idea that the law and absolutes are there for the protection of society. Typically, a situationist could result in killing someone if they managed to base it around bringing the most unconditional love for another, which would be morally wrong and go against thou shalt not murder. It deconstructs itself. We need a specific or definitive idea of what outcome is the most valued, right before we can decide upon which acts are needed to bring about the right thing.
Evaluation. It is clear the majority would agree the weaknesses do outweigh the strengths of situation ethics. The weaknesses show why it has not been adopted by mainstream moral thinking in any of the major Christian churches. Situationist thinking can be seen as a response to the collapse of many moral certainties as well as the inadequacies of legalistic moral thinking, but it would be more applicable to take a different approach. Thank you for watching. If you want this channel to upload more videos on A-level religious studies, please like this video and subscribe this channel.